Cambridge. Welcome to What's That About, where we answer all your questions about the pressing issues of the day, brought to you by CCTV.
CCTV, television, for people who still have them.
Or you can watch it on your phone. In any case, our first letter comes from Mark on Pleasant Street. Mark asks, seems like the big city council battles over zoning and bike lanes are almost over. So what are going to be the next major issues before the council this term?
That's a good question, Mark. But what do we know? We're just a couple of mooks on a cable access show. So I asked someone who might be a little more knowledgeable, Vice Mayor Burhan Azeem.
You spoke to Burhan?
Sure did. Councilor Azeem was kind enough to sit down and answer questions about his agenda for the upcoming term in another segment of Call Your Councilor.
I love it when you actually do some work.
One thing to note, a few days after this interview, the Cambridge Day broke the news that Mr. Azeem is seriously thinking about running for retiring State Senator Pat Jalen's seat. Unfortunately, this did not come up during our conversation.
You really missed a scoop there, Max.
Hey, I'm not a real reporter. I can barely keep my shoes tied. Anyway, Mark, Mr. Azeem tends to agree with you about the upcoming term. Although a final cycle of upzoning votes is going on right now for Cambridge Street, Porter Square, and Central Square, once that is over, the zoning issues will be put to bed for a while.
Whatever happens with Cambridge Street, we just then have Central Square, but then the whole city will have gone through the rezoning process. So I don't think that there will be a major rezoning after that. And, for the bike lanes as well, like the cycling safety ordinance was passed a number of terms ago, and it's also expected to be completed this term. So I think two of the top issues that we've been fighting in as a city will one way or another be resolved this term.
Did you say what else he's going to focus on now that he's successfully passed the multifamily housing ordinance?
He said he's considering reining in the historic commissions that are now trying to use their powers to curtail any new housing. He didn't say this, but essentially the NIMBYs have grasped onto the historic commissions as one of their last tools to prevent building more density in Cambridge.
I actually feel a lot of empathy for Cambridge being a historic city. There's a lot of landmarks and a lot of really important history that we want to preserve. Yeah. And I feel like my preference would still not be to do anything on that, but like the historical commission and the conservation districts need to come along a little bit. There's a little bit of risk of like people feeling that like the only hard block on housing now is that, and that they kind of want to like backfill their concerns about like dimensional stuff and new housing and kind of mold the historical commission to doing that work, which is not really their goal.
Interesting. What are some other items on his housing agenda?
Burhan told me he's focused on getting housing to pencil out, which means builders will be able to make money constructing new housing, something that is obviously required if the city wants to rely on the private sector to build more density.
In terms of housing, like I don't think a win is passing big policy. I think it's actually building new units. It's really hard for housing to pencil in this environment. And I think that a really unfortunate equilibrium would be, the multifamily housing was like, a big change. And I know that for some people, it was a scary change and something that they're still coming to terms with and figuring out how comfortable they are. I think a pretty bad outcome would be housing is possible everywhere in greater density, but actually pencils nowhere.
Yeah, and one controversial change Vice Mayor Azeem is not interested in making to make finances work is reducing the 20% inclusionary zoning requirement. He argues that there's better tools to make housing construction affordable without lifting the main requirement left that encourages income diversity in city housing.
And then inclusionary, I think, at least for me, is a top priority in terms of having affordable units that, both for the sense of like, here's a low income unit and someone who otherwise would not be able to afford in Cambridge can live here in a way that's very direct and visible to see. But also for like, I think the vision of it of like, we're building a new building, and even if you're someone who believes in more of like a supply demand, like it's still good to build housing, even if it's market rate because it makes the load easier on everyone else. I think it's still good from an integration perspective of saying like, here's a new big building, and it's not just for wealthier people. There's like low income residents or middle income residents who live in that same building, and it's a very integrated city. But there's been a lot of creative solutions, like Baltimore and Seattle kind of do a tax incentive. My preference would be to do an incentive tax.
I also got a chance to ask him about local builder Patrick Barrett's lawsuit attempting to void inclusionary zoning completely.
In my opinion, I think it's fairly frivolous. Like there's been a lot of similar lawsuits in the past, and for the most part, they don't go anywhere.
Did you two just nerd out about housing the whole time, or did you discuss other matters in the city?
I happen to think talking about zoning is very sexy, Julie.
Gross.
But we also covered a wide range of other topics in our 50-plus minute interview, from what it means to be vice mayor, to what social housing looks like in Cambridge, to how the city is trying to fight this federal government and the ICE insurgencies. The full interview is available on CCTV and our YouTube page here. Boop. Two issues close to my heart that we discussed were his advocacy for municipal broadband and the push for passenger rail on the Grand Junction connector.
And the Grand Junction is almost a perfect project for that because it's like land that we own, right? There's tracks on that land, and Amtrak or the MBTA uses that land like once or twice a day to shuttle trains back and forth. So it's like we have the land, we have the tracks, and we run tracks on that tracks on that land that we own, right? And so it's like, why can't we just have passenger service, right? And it's almost like a little bit of that urban ring thing that we've been talking about for a while, where you would be able to go from the future Harvard Alston campus, where West Station will also be, where you'll be able to get to Worcester, to MIT, to Kendall Square, to all the way to North Station.
Well, you already told us that Burhan didn't discuss his flirtation with running for state senate. Did he give you any hints anyway about his goals during your interview?
He did complain about the state government several times.
We forget like the optimism of building and progressing forward, I think. Like I think that like, even in Cambridge, there was a lot of like, Charlie Baker is not that bad, or like the state legislature, Massachusetts is mostly well governed. And it's like actually like we let our transit system decay so significantly when, we have the GDP of Poland in Metro Boston. Like we should be able to build transit, and it should not be that difficult to get around. And it's very possible, but we just have to remember that, government can actually do things.
And he also mentioned how hard it is to get the state legislature to sign off on things like smart tax incentives or Dana Bullis's call for a land value tax. Possibly Mr. Azeem thinks he can effect change more easily from inside the legislature than out. Of note, if Azeem does decide to step down from the council, Bullis will be his replacement by ranked choice votes, so his pro-housing platform on the council likely wouldn't suffer that much. But be careful, Burhan, because Beacon Hill is an opaque, corrupt hellhole, and we don't want our very effective city councilor turning into just one more impotent state legislator, bowing to the almost unlimited power of Senate President Karen Spilka.
There will be plenty of time to worry about that later, Max. The election isn't until November.
True. This has been another exciting episode of Call Your Councilor. In the meantime, there's plenty of time for Vice Mayor Azeem to come back on the show and tell us about his state senate plans. Wink, wink, wink. Until next week, we'll see
See you first.